Hello everyone, welcome back to our video series, Bridging the Gap. This is episode 4 and today we'll be talking about the connections between stones. And so we'll be looking at, first of all, the relationship between two stones, and then we'll be looking at the relationship between multiple stones and some common shapes you might want to look out for in your games. Okay, you might notice that we're on a different program. This is C Goban and it's used to play KGS most often. However, it has a great review and editing system. I have it here open today because it has this text block that you can use on the right. And so you'll see for most of these, I'll have the English name. And then if I think it's common, I'll have the Japanese name. And lastly, I'll have the Korean name. Not because it's used a lot in English-speaking audiences, but because it's really cool. They use the kind of outline the stones make and compare it to Chinese characters and compare it to that. So let's jump right into it. The first move we're going to look at is the stretch. The simple extension, you just play right next to your stone, and these guys are 100% solid, can't be broken apart. So all of these moves have some strengths and weaknesses that we'll be looking at today. So the strength here is that this is 100% connected. There's absolutely no way for it to be split apart unless you cheat and move the stone. The cost it comes with though is that it's a little bit slow, right? So you're kind of playing in the same place twice, if that makes sense. However, oftentimes this will be the right move to play, the necessary move to play. And it's better to play solidly sometimes than try to stretch yourself out thin and be cut and die, which is never a good thing. One quick thing I will note is that when you have two stones like this, there is an ideal extension. And so oftentimes when you're in the middle of the board, you want to play 2 spaces away from this little wall of 2. However, when you're down on the side of the board, the ideal often becomes away 3. And so on the side of the board, I think there's a good adage that's often used that's you play away from the wall, how high the wall is +1. And so because we have a wall of 2, we go 2 + 1, 3 away. Okay. So moving on to the next, this is the diagonal move. You'll often also hear by the Japanese name Kosumi. And so this is like 99% of the time it's connected, because if white plays here, black can simply play on the other side and vice versa. And so these stones are usually treated as connected. However, there are certain circumstances when oftentimes if you're surrounded by a lot with a lot going on, white might be able to play this and threaten something else. And then black does not have the time to connect. And so white can cut. And so that's something to be careful about, but in an isolated situation like this, these stones are connected. Okay, next we have the one space jump. So the one space jump is pretty secure. There's usually bad things that happen if white tries to come in here really aggressively. Black can first of all pick a side to Atari, white has to come out, and then black can connect. I don't know, white might try to keep going, but then white has to come out. Black can still save the stone. Black has thickness on one side and he gets to choose which side. So a lot of the times it isn't good for the enemy player to carelessly cut here. Another move that's kind of annoying against this is the peep. And so if white plays here, most of the time black will have to connect, and then white basically just got a free move here at the expense of a move that you really didn't need, kind of, because you're treating these stones as connected and you just played an extra move there. So this peep can be annoying at times, but the benefit you get for that is that your stone moves out a bit faster than if you're just playing the extension or the diagonal. Okay, next we have the knight's move. It's up 2 over 1, just like the way a knight moves in chess. And so this is, again, pretty safe. You have to be careful for this though. In certain situations, white can cut at the waist, as we say. And if white plays here, as long as this ladder is not working, suddenly black has a problem, and black has to decide how it wants to respond and deal with this situation. However, this is a relatively safe move to play, and the stones definitely have still quite a strong connection. Okay, next we're looking at the 2-space jump. I'm going to say starting here, you really have to be careful that white can't just easily cut through. If you play this in the wrong situation, white can, just play in here. And then this can get kind of complicated really quick. Most simply, white might try to crosscut, white can pull back, and you still have to decide things. White can play here. This might not be that great, but lots of problems. So this is definitely not 100% connected anymore, and you have to make sure that you're ready to deal with white trying to cut through or poke through, and have a response ready. That's the case with any move and go. Again, we're talking about reading and we're talking about efficiency. You can't just say, okay, I like this one move. You have to think ahead. Like, Go is a 2-player game. It's not just me. After I play it, what's the follow-up? What can the opponent play? And then does that continuation look okay for me? Okay, next we have the large knight's move, which is like a regular knight's move, just one space larger. So this one, again, is a little bit tenuous. Oftentimes these moves are a lot closer when played on the edge of the board, because there's limited space for the opposing player to cut and maneuver. But this is, I'd say, along with the 2-space jump, there is definitely a relationship between these stones. It's not easy to completely cut them apart without, thinning yourself out. However, it can be cut apart with relative ease. Definitely much easier than the 1-spaced knight's move or 1-space jump, or like the diagonal, obviously. But again, a move that you might consider when you're trying to move around the board. Okay, next we have the 3-space jump. You almost never see this in the center of the board, at least purely between 2 stones. If you have like a row, yeah, sure, you might see it, but just like this, most simply, white can just play here. And then suddenly you're completely cut apart. So it's hard to say that there is really a relationship, a connection between these 2 stones as is. Most often you'll see this on the side of a board. You might come across a situation like this where black has played 2 low stones 3 spaces apart. This isn't necessarily bad, but you do have to keep in mind, again, that white can play here, and you need to be prepared to deal with it. Okay, next we have the very large knight's move. I don't think anyone actually calls it that, but that's the name that Sensei's library gives, so I'll use it here. The very large knight's move, again, is one that you don't really see out in the open. Again, it's one that you might see on the side, so this is actually a relatively common sequence. White can be either here or here, and then black plays this move. And so there's actually really common patterns dealing with this. And I'll try to link a lecture that I revisit quite often talking about this exact position, but the continuation kind of goes like this, and white has to be prepared to deal with a ladder here, and even besides, there's other things that can happen. So if black plays this move, he needs to know how to deal with the white invasion at this point. Okay. And for our last move between 2 stones, we'll be looking at the elephant jump. So this is one I'd really caution players to stay away from if they're starting out in Go. The reason is there's this, what we call an elephant eye, right in the middle. And if white plays here, it's kind of difficult to know what to do with it. The most common response, I'd say, is you just play this kind of move and figure it out one way or another. But you do need to have a plan, in effect. Right, this is a glaring weakness, and if black does not have a set plan to deal with white's poking the elephant eye, then you might get yourself into some trouble. So I'd say avoid this one unless you kind of know what you're doing. Okay, so that is all the single stone connections. Next we'll look at some multi-stone connections. So these are some common shapes you'll see. So first we'll look at this one in the middle. This one's called the tiger's mouth. So the tiger's mouth, really protects this one point. It's a flexible point in which you can play out. You can kind of make more eye space. Lots of good things come from the shape. It is, again, though, you have to keep in mind just one move away from those one move points we talked about in the first video of the series. And so if you're purely playing this shape everywhere, that's not a very efficient or good use of your stones. But when you need to protect some stones, and it might occur naturally, so if white has stones like this, and you need to protect this group, you might consider playing something like this. And this might be the correct response. So that's the tiger's mouth. Next, we'll look at the table shape. So the table shape is considered kind of the gold standard of good shape. And the reason it is considered that is, first of all, these stones are all connected. It's really, really hard to cut them apart. You know, white can try to poke, but black has this move. White can try to come in here, but black can revert to this kind of net position that we reviewed last time. And so this is a good shape in that it's, first of all, connected, and second of all, you know, it's really easy for black to make an eye or threaten to make eyes, and so it has good eye shape is what we call it. It has good potential to quickly become alive. So if you need to connect groups of stones, like, you know, you have this kind of deal, and white is all around, you might play this move to try to connect and make the table shape. Okay, there are some variations, like here, I think this maybe here, and they all have their varying strengths and weaknesses that is kind of beyond the scope of this video. But in general, if you have something that looks like this, you're probably doing not that bad. Okay, this third one here down on the bottom, we call the bamboo joint because it looks like kind of the joints between segments of a bamboo tree. And this is the strength of this group is that it's 100% connected, right? So just kind of like the diagonal, if white plays here, black can play here. And if white tries to cut through here, black can play here. And so these stones are 100% connected, which makes it useful just in connections. But unlike the table shape, there's not really a lot of eye potential, right? So even if white plays something like this, if you're surrounded and there's kind of limited space, black has a really hard time trying to make an eye here. And so if you're trying to make a group live, you might want to consider another shape besides the bamboo joint. Maybe the table shape. Yeah. Okay, last we'll look at kind of composite shapes. So first on this upper right hand side, we have the trumpet shape. And so this position might arise naturally. So you're like this, white pushes, black blocks, white hanes, you know, this happens and white decides not to cut, black might play this. And so this is something that you might consider to protect your two cutting points. But you have to be careful. You know, sometimes this might be better, and the reason why is because white has this really annoying move to deal with. So white can peep here, black has to block. White might even be able to peep here, black has to block, and suddenly you have this special dumpling shape we have a name for called the B2 bomber. And then white has free stones on the outside. You don't really have any eye potential, and again, you're just being really inefficient with these stones. And so you have to be careful when you play this. Yeah, consider something like this instead, and you can see there's a protection here for a ladder. And even if white connects, at least you save a stone, and you can try to play something like this later. Okay, it's a trumpet. Lastly, we have the mouth shape here on the left, and you can kind of look at this as an empty net. And so remember, this is the net shape. And so if black plays here preemptively, you suddenly have a free eye here, right? Because white can't play in here, and white certainly can't put himself in the net. That would be kind of a dumb move. Conversely, though, this is what we call a vital point. So kind of like we talked about those moves last time that can kill a group. This is really painful for black to deal with because black can't make an eye, first of all, you know, or even if white plays elsewhere, this is a false eye if one gets surrounded. And also, you know, you're forced into making this kind of inefficient shape here that doesn't really do a lot for you. However, if you manage to get this move in, this is a solid connection. You have an eye. White can't really break you apart, and you have good influence on the outside. So that's really all the content for today. Lastly, I want to point you guys towards D-Son's shape lecture to learn more about shape. D-Son was a legendary figure in the Go community, and he taught many people back in KGS's heyday. You know, I definitely have very fond memories of teaching games with him and things that he's taught me. Sadly, he passed away from the coronavirus. However, his shape lecture still remains in circulation and is widely regarded, I'd say, as the gold standard of good shape and teaching good shape to beginners. So I'll post a link to that also down below and take a look. Okay, thanks for watching. Next time, we'll be doing something different. So we've covered a lot of kind of basic shapes and reading techniques. And so we'll be looking at things like game reviews and some things to kind of see where we can apply what we've learned and how those come about in actual games. Okay, thanks for watching, and Stonefly out.